Good afternoon, and welcome to Propelling New York Forward, a continuing series from the MedTech Association about the biomed industry's response to the COVID-19 pandemic and how we begin the process of restarting New York State's economy. First, let me thank our sponsors who helped make this series possible. I want to thank Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, MPR Associates, Thermo Fisher Scientific, GKG, Barclay Damon, and Fuse Hub. We can't do these types of events without the support of our sponsors, and if you're interested in sponsoring, we'd love to hear from you, and please feel free to reach out. Of course, you can always reach out for any reasons if you want to talk to us here at MedTech, and you can find us at medtech.org. I am pleased to have with us today Matt Watson, who is the Senior Vice President at the Empire State Development Corporation, and Matt's work focuses significantly in the area of technology development and support from the state. Matt and the folks at Empire State Development have been terrific partners for us at MedTech and certainly for the biomed industry in general across the state of New York. And so we're going to spend some time, Matt and I, hopefully more Matt than me, talking about Empire State Development, talking about the landscape of resources through programs like NYSTAR, where Matt thinks we may be headed in New York in terms of technology development, and then we'll open it up for some questions and answer at the conclusion of this. All of you who are participating today, with the exception of Matt and me, are both muted and hidden, so we don't get to see you or hear from you, but we do want to encourage your participation. And across the bottom of the screen, if you hover your cursor, you will find a Q&A section. Please, I want to encourage you to send us your questions, and we will do the best we can to get them answered by Matt and his team. Of course, as well, as is the case with all of our Propelling New York series, these recordings are saved, and you can access any of our past recordings by going to our website at medtech.org and find a full recording. With that said, let me, Matt, ask you if you could. Many in our audience are certainly aware of the work of Empire State Development, but I got to tell you, for those of us who have been watching Governor Cuomo's weekly addresses and have been watching the state's response to the COVID pandemic as it's progressed, it feels like every day ESD, Empire State Development, is the go-to agency that we look to for guidance, for assistance, for helping us navigate this process. And I'm wondering if you could just kind of ground us as a bit of background in the role of Empire State Development, and then more specifically talk about NYSTAR and some of the programs that fall under your jurisdiction.
Sure, and thanks, Wynn, for having me on today. So Empire State Development, I think everybody knows, is the state agency devoted to economic development. And as you said, ESD has a lot of roles and responsibilities. We have MWBE, tourism, that's minority women-owned businesses, so the group that takes a look and makes sure that folks that have a state contract are engaging the appropriate amount of their funding that they receive to MWBE services. Tourism is funded through ESD. We have a loans and grants department that helps with tax incentives and grants to help companies relocate to New York, stay in New York, or expand in New York. And Pravina Raghavan, who's my boss, executive vice president, she has a portfolio devoted to small businesses, venture funding, and we're also included in that portfolio. So there's a lot of different hats that the division wears, a lot of responsibilities. We played in most recent pandemic issues that we've been seeing. ESD's been doing some of the vetting for companies that were interested in changing their production over to COVID-related products and technology. We did the early vetting for that, and then referred them to the appropriate procurement people to do further vetting and decide on who's they're gonna purchase from. Also, a lot of the business regulations that are coming through, we're managing the email inflow of that and responding with the appropriate information to let businesses know if they can open, if they can't open, and anything else that they're asking about. So yeah, it's been quite a lot of work being done remotely from the whole group, and I think everybody's been stepping up and doing a great job. So hopefully that answers that part, and I could jump, unless you have any questions, I could jump in and talk about our division.
That would be great, thanks.
All right. So NISTAR, it's really, we used to be a standalone public authority called NISTAR. It actually meant something back then. Now we're the Division of Science Technology, Division of Science Innovation and Technology, but people have always known us as NISTAR, so they still call us NISTAR. So I stayed with the branding and haven't tried to get rid of it because it does have some national sway. So NISTAR, we get about $60 million a year in state and federal funding. With that, we fund over 70 centers across the state, which we really feel supports the innovation ecosystem. Those 70 centers include 29 university research centers, which is a Center for Advanced Technology program, the CAT program, I think a lot of people are familiar with, and the Center of Excellence program. And so again, between those 29 centers, we have roughly 13 or 14 different universities that we fund just through that program. We have 30 hotspots and incubators. The hotspots are basically incubators with additional responsibilities. We have one hotspot in every region of the state where the expectation is they act as the supporter of entrepreneurial activities in their region. So their role is to connect with incubators in their region, to try to do co-programming, try to collaborate, and they also can offer some tax benefits to companies, early stage companies. So there's a lot of benefit for that ecosystem in the region to work together to leverage those tax benefits. In addition, we have the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program. That's a federal program where we get about $6 million a year, add some state funding to it, and support 11 centers across the state. Again, we have one center for each region, so that's 10. And then we have an 11th center that acts as a statewide representative to help with convening and collaboration and things of that nature. And that's Fuse Hub, who is one of your sponsors today. And they really act as the voice of manufacturing in the state. They work closely with us and our federal sponsors to make sure information is flowing correctly and things of that nature. In addition, we have the Science and Tech Law Center, which again is one of your members, I saw, and a host of other programs that we fund on the smaller side. I didn't want to take up all of today just running through all of those, so I figured I'd just highlight some of the bigger ones. And if I'm going to jump into what I view as our primary function.
Yeah, that would be great.
All right, so I view we have three core functions at NISTAR. It's something I've, ever since I took over about probably 8 years ago, it's something I've been really pushing for. The first, of course, being the managing the programs, right? We have to oversee and make sure that key goals and metrics are being hit, that funding's going towards what it needs to be, the intended purpose, that things are the money's being spent properly, reporting's done. So all the administrative functions that you would expect with a government program. The second, though, key function I feel we have is to attract federal funds, as many federal dollars as we can to the state. And we do that on a regular basis. We look at what's out there currently. And then we try to determine if it's something that we can apply as an agency, or can we bring in partners to go after that and support their applications. So we're very mindful of trying to coordinate with our funded centers and others out there to try to draw those dollars. But we're also getting more and more active with trying to, even before the solicitations come out, can we start working with program managers, start making them aware of the great stuff that's going on in New York State. So as they're developing some of these solicitations, they have us in mind. So they'd say, you know what New York State is doing, we really want to see happen across the country. So let's include that in our request for proposals. Well, they call it FFOs, right? Federal funding opportunities. But let's really see if we can support some of those activities, and then make it hopefully easier for us to draw some funding to the state down the road. So we're being proactive and really trying to build some of those relationships. And then the third role or function that I really see us playing is really strengthening New York State's innovation ecosystem. We're trying to always play a role at bringing folks together. So I saw the New York State Innovation Summit is listed on your website as in October. Unfortunately, we're currently looking at pushing that out because of the pandemic. So we might do some virtual activities for that, and then hopefully have an in-person summit either this spring or maybe a little further out. So we're currently trying to set the date for that. But that's one of our flagship events where we bring our funded centers together, we bring industry together, and anyone else that really is interested in this space. Last year, we had a venture capitalists come, and Republic, which is a crowdfunding platform. Folks like that, we want in a room together to really talk about who's doing what. Is there an opportunity to work together? Just build awareness. The more awareness we can build, the more attention we're going to get on in this state about the incredible things we're doing, and the more funding we're going to draw to the state. So that's a big role of ours, I feel, and it's something we're going to continue. We've actually done things of that nature on the regional level too, just to support the local ecosystems. Just anything we could do to encourage collaboration, to highlight the technology that's being developed, and the great work that's being done throughout our various systems.
So Matt, I'm wondering if I could get you to define some terms perhaps, or we could drill down just a little bit. When you talk about innovation and supporting innovation, I suspect some of our listeners may be hearing startup or early stage companies. Is that the focus, or do you see innovation as also encompassing existing and larger companies that are looking to innovate or change their work products or their methodologies?
That's question actually made me think of a number of things that I did not highlight that I should. All of our funding goes to applied research. So it's not the basic research, it's not the discoveries, but our funding is really to work with industry and make sure that we're helping move industry along. And innovation is such an overused term, and I wish I could come up with a better term, but yes, I'm talking more broadly. So when you look at our suite of programs, we can help from back of napkin all the way through maturity. So I think everybody understands some of the stuff we can do for the early stage companies, but for the more mature companies, one of the things that we're looking to help with is, are there ways to improve your processes? Are there ways to look at your current products to figure out ways to add new technology to advance them, to keep them relevant, to allow you to continue charging a premium price for that product? Are there new markets that you could be looking at, new supply chain opportunities, whatever it is? So, one other thing about established companies that we're really interested in doing is if these early stage companies, such a small number of them actually get venture funding. So we're looking at, can we play a role in introducing these early stage companies to the mature companies and see if there's a partnership that could be developed, and again, keep that mature company relevant, keep that product relevant, and just help that company continue moving forward.
So let's pretend that I'm sitting at XYZ manufacturing company located somewhere here in New York, and puzzling over some of the challenges that my business may be facing. How do I best connect with the resources at ESD or at NYSTAR? Where do I begin that journey?
So I want to get our system to the point, we're not there yet. Want to get our system to the point where you can enter in at any center, and then you have access to the vast network. We're getting there, but we still got some. It's mainly because not all our individual centers feel comfortable with understanding the broader ecosystem or where to go to next. Until that happens, though, you can always reach out to NYSTAR or Fuse Hub. That's one of their primary roles. If a company needs something, needs an expert, they need a new technology, they need a new supplier or an additional supplier, then they have a whole team devoted to taking those calls, taking those emails, and then working with our entire system, figure out, do we have those capabilities in New York? If so, do they have the capability? Are they overloaded? And are they the right person for this job? It's basically what they do. If it's not in New York, then we expand it outside to the broader US. And we have national networks that we leverage, the MEP network included, to try to look for some of those experts and some of that technology.
So let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about some of the centers. And you mentioned, of course, one of the centers that many of our members work with, and that is, of course, the Science and Law Technology Center. I'm wondering if you can kind of talk a little bit about the work that they do, and are they unique? Are they how do you kind of create your constellation of available centers?
Yes, they are unique. They're the only ones that we fund. We don't give them nearly enough money for the work they do. Hopefully Jack's not listening, otherwise my phone might be ringing. But yeah, they do terrific stuff. We're constantly sending companies their way, early stage companies their way, to IP landscaping, to take a look at the FDA regulations, to figure out if they can help address some of those regulations. It's just a phenomenal program that they're running, to where they're connecting law students to these young companies to really help both the law student and the company move forward. So it's just a terrific program. They're doing a lot of different projects it's small dollar projects, fortunately, so they can really stretch the funding we give them, but they're doing a ton of programs. They're doing a great job.
So, not to focus too much on, and I hope actually to have Jack Rudnick or Molly Zimmerman on in a future episode, perhaps, to talk about that program. But just, kind of help me understand what's the thinking at the state level. So, here is an organization that's housed at a law school that is focused on both teaching students and also providing services in terms of intellectual property and what have you. Where does the state of New York fit into that process?
So I'll give you an example that goes again towards the strengthening the ecosystem effort that I was talking about. So we work closely with Fuse Hub on holding solution forums every year. Sometimes they're broad, sometimes they're specifically focused to a technology sector. We bring resources in across the room, across the state, into the room together. So we usually have about 15 to 20 resources. And then we bring companies in from all sizes, all maturity levels, into that room together in a speed dating format. What we do beforehand is have interviews with the companies to figure out what their needs are, where their weaknesses are, where the hurdles they have to get over are. And then we make recommendations to them on who they should talk to. We also educate the resources in the room. These are the companies that are going to be here today. This is what they're looking for. And so the conversation can start at a higher level. So you sit down. You don't have to wait your 15 minutes on the introductions. You can jump right into it, right? So that type of effort is all concentrated on things of how can we do the handoffs? How can we get the right pieces in place at the right time to help accelerate whatever it is that the company is trying to do, whether it's technology, whether it's addressing a challenge, or whatever it is. How can we bring in the Science and Tech Law Center at the right time to help Kathy's incubator at Upstate Medical Center, that then might send it over to our life science CAD or bio CAD in Buffalo, that might take it up to the next level, that might bring in Clarkson to take a look at some of the materials that need to be improved, addressed, you know, the materials challenges. So we're trying to figure out, you know, how can we make it easier for the company, make it more efficient for everybody, so we're not wasting time, money, and removing those barriers as best we can.
And tell me, Matt, I'm guessing you must get this question often. So let's assume I'm operating a manufacturing facility in the capital region, and we have a particular need, say, in some materials analysis. And I know you've got a center funded out of Cornell in Ithaca. Boy, I'm in Rensselaer. That's in Ithaca. Is that a resource that's available to me, or how do I, you know, are these locally based resources?
Not at all. So even though there are regional centers, those regional centers can easily help across the state. CCMR is a great example. Cornell Center for Materials Research, John Sinnen and Michelle Vanderwalt is terrific. John is, I regularly call him, trying to help companies figure out challenges. He's one of those guys that has the whole ecosystem in mind. So if he can't figure it out at Cornell, bringing in all his different, he has access to all that faculty, right? If he can't identify somebody on faculty that can help, then he has a pretty good understanding of who's out there across the state, different universities, different nonprofits that should be able to help. So he's a great resource. So I'm glad you actually brought him up, but he's available statewide, like 95% of our other centers.
You know, we often talk here at MedTech about kind of the embedded parochialism, if you will, certainly that exists in upstate New York, where, you know, Buffalo and Rochester and Syracuse and Albany and Binghamton are all separate places. And of course, we look at our neighbors down in the metropolitan region, and perhaps a 2-hour commute from Suffolk County to Manhattan feels like nothing, but somehow a 2-hour drive from Syracuse to Albany feels insurmountable. And I'm wondering if that's a dynamic that you've noticed too, and how we might kind of break through that regionalism.
Well, and it's funny because what got me down this path of, you know, holistic network of everybody having the whole system in mind is I used to refer companies to individual centers, and this one I have in mind was a regional center. I referred the company, then I moved on to other things. A few months later, I ran into the person I referred them to, said, "Hey, so whatever happened to them?" The guy said, "You know what? I had nothing I can help them with, so we dropped it." I was like, "You could have sent them back to me." And that's you never want to see that. You know, we have incredible talent in this state. So if somebody can't help them, I know there's somebody else in our family, or, you know, it doesn't need to be a funded center of ours either. We have partners all over the state that we work with that we don't fund, but they're terrific advocates. And so that's really why I started down this path of, we really need to treat this as a network, make sure that companies are getting to where they need to go. And what I see across the state is people love this. Our centers, the staff of these centers absolutely love what they're doing. They don't mind a 4-hour drive. You know, they're more than willing to go out, and they love going to visit companies and taking a walk around the facilities to see what's being done. There's so much excitement when I talk to somebody after they've done a company visit that, you know, that 4-hour drive's nothing to them.
And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit too about the connection to the academic community. You know, so many of your centers are located, or at least co-located on university or campus or college campuses, and certainly for us at MedTech, combining and connecting the research and academic community to the private industry community is one of the important elements of what we hope to do. And I'm wondering if you can talk, you know, just discuss with us a little bit about where do the state's academic institutions fit into this mix? What's the value for them in being involved? What's the value for the industry side of the equation?
Sorry, you're witnessing too many thoughts come into my front of my head at one time, so there's a little bit of a log jam. You know, there's a number of different things going on right there, right? So the universities, the benefit is, it could be financial, they could be getting royalties or licensing fees from the technology, so there's upside to that, but also just to track students. If you could talk about the technology that's being done there, the companies that have been spun out of the university, all that great work, it's huge benefit for them. Plus the faculty themselves, you know, they love doing this. It gives them a reason to work in the lab, you know, with a single focus. So there's a lot of great faculty out there that love working with companies. On the industry side, you know, I don't know how many years ago this started, but huge cuts in R&D at the companies, right? So the upfront expense of trying to do new discoveries, advanced technology, that's really been taken away from the industry, put in the hands of the faculty. So there's a huge benefit to the companies that engage the universities to really move forward, stay relevant, and really start up companies. So the benefits are all there for everybody. What we've been doing recently is I think it was about a year ago, we started having some blue sky meetings with tech transfer offices and incubator types just to figure out, you know, what are the barriers to you guys to try to spin some of this technology out? Is it that it's hard for the researcher to describe a commercial purpose of that technology, or is it that you know, we're trying to dig deeper and figure out where we can play a role in trying to help tech transfer offices get technology in the company's hands. So we've had about 2 or 3 meetings around there. Again, we're having each meeting we had, the attendance was growing, the energy and excitement was there. So everybody is excited about helping New York with advancing technology. We unfortunately had to cancel our last meeting because that was when the outbreak just happened. And so we're probably gonna have to wait. We should probably have a virtual meeting. Can't imagine we should wait much longer, but we gotta maintain that excitement and bring everybody back together and keep moving forward.
And I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit, I'd love to know your thoughts about where you think, you know, maybe where the state of New York thinks that those of us in the biomed community may be headed, where we were going. Certainly, I think over the last few years, we've witnessed some real traction and efforts to grow the eds and meds economy in New York. Certainly, there have been parts of the state. The growth at the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus is a great example of some real supercharged growth in our area. Kind of, what's your sense? I know we're still in the midst of a huge period of change, but do you see a change of priorities coming out of this? Do you think we're going to eventually pivot back to the strategies that we looked at before, or what kind of lessons can we learn?
I wouldn't say change of strategies. I tend not to be very good at dropping strategies unless they're not working. So maybe adding on strategies. So no, I don't think that everything's going back the way it was. So along the strategy question, we won $2.6 million from the NIST MEP, National Institute of Standards Technology Manufacturing Extension Partnership. That's the federal program I mentioned earlier. With that, we just held a competition. We're awarding $800,000 to, we haven't announced it yet, so I can't name who the awardee is yet, but we're awarding $800,000 to an entity to take a look at supply chain and reshoring efforts, right? What I think we did see from this pandemic is how fragile some of the supply chains can be and how disruptive it is if there's a pandemic. But, you know, that could also be caused by weather, could be caused by trade wars or other things. So what can we do to try to strengthen that supply chain and try to lessen disruptions in the future? You know, in our role, we were trying to, early on in the pandemic, we were trying to find companies that could supply PPE or change their production quickly to make PPE. And we were seeing a lot of requests for help identifying suppliers of elastic. Where folks were asking for suppliers of reagents. You know, it became apparent quickly that, you know, this type of stuff, that production can stop quickly because people can't get the supplies they need, depending on where they're coming from or the limited supply. So that $800,000 that we're about to award is to figure out what efforts we could do to reshore production, and also to look at, are there ways to redesign a product so that less materials is going to be needed, so you're not going to need as much of that material that's in shortage? Or is there different material that, you know, you mentioned CCMR, Alfred University, Clarkson University, and a number of other of our centers have tremendous capabilities around materials research. So is there different materials that could be used to replace that material that's in critical shortage? So those are the type of things that we're trying to support under that 800,000. It's just the beginning, kind of learning, and then we'll see where that goes from there, and hopefully get additional money to take it a step further. But we're also trying to figure out the PPE, not the loan, but the equipment. Trying to take a look at what can we do to make more of the PPE in state. So we're putting about $650,000 towards that effort to figure out who can make it. How can we help the companies that are opening, have just opened or about to open, make sure that they have access, that they're not competing with the hospitals or large buyers, but can we help them identify suppliers that could get the masks or other equipment necessary to keep their employees safe? So that's the function of that other award. And then there's another one where we're funding a center to figure out how to do virtual assessments and virtual assistance. So just because our centers can't go into a facility to take a tour to learn where the problems are, where they can help, shouldn't stop us from helping. So we got to figure out, can we do some of this virtually? Learn what the problems are virtually, and then try to assist as much as possible virtually, and then do as much as you can until you're able to go back in the facility to help even further. So those are some of the efforts we're funding with that 2.6, just to strengthen our position and also to keep things moving on in the future if there's further disruptions.
So early on in this pandemic, Matt, certainly many of our members and folks all over really kind of jumped in immediately to try to identify and satisfy particular local needs. And, you know, one of the challenges, of course, is that the turnaround time in being able to meet some of those immediate needs often meant that we just couldn't respond as quickly as we'd like. But as we look at lessons learned here in New York, I'm wondering about your thoughts about how can manufacturers, how can innovators in New York perhaps take advantage of some of the lessons that we learned by having been socked by the pandemic at an earlier, harder stage than other parts of the country, and use that to kind of expand markets or find opportunities elsewhere, either across the United States or internationally. Is that something that you folks are involved in?
To some degree, you know, we did call out to our centers looking for technology that can help during the pandemic. We found some incredible companies and companies that were hopefully we have a smart cities initiative that's run through the chamber, the governor's office rather, that we're supporting. And what we're hopeful for is we just received municipal applications, and some of them are health related, some of the problems they're trying to address. So, that's a great opportunity to look at how can we do mass area disinfections to better protect the citizens. How can we make it easier for folks to get information, whatever it is. This is a great time to do demos in the smart cities and initiatives to really validate and use the cities as early adopters. So we're hopeful that the problem statements of the cities are going to enable us to engage some of those technology companies you're talking about. If not, we are looking through the grants I just mentioned and future grants. Those are things that we're always mindful of. How do we engage early stage companies, be early adopters, and support their evolution, try to get them into the commercial market quicker? So it's something that we're mindful of and trying to work towards.
Great. Let me just make a quick reminder to our audience. If you've got particular questions, we've got a few more minutes. We've had some questions come in, but I want to make sure that we're catching your inquiry. So feel free to send us a message along using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Matt, one question that has come in, and let me just make sure that I've captured this correctly. One of the lessons that appears to have been learned from the pandemic is that we did not have as strong a network or coordination across our hospital systems in New York as perhaps we would have liked to. And there were, certainly concerns and bumps along the road as we tried to make sure that we had access facilities and sharing of equipment across regions. Do you see efforts or energy being placed into kind of taking that coordination model into other places, perhaps private industry? What could, for example, MedTech and its members be doing to better coordinate our efforts to assist the state as it's looking at ways to increase reshoring or developing stockpiles or ready access to PPE and the like?
So I do see a big need, and as you mentioned, the hospitals, they were getting inundated with companies looking for an opportunity for this new sales channel. So they were getting flooded with calls, emails, and I think when that happens, you get so overwhelmed, you turn to who can deliver, right? So you're just drowned in information, so you could go to the first trusted source that you're most comfortable with. So I think an organization like yours is well suited to play that role. You should be a trusted advisor to hospitals and other organizations, and serve as a validator of the companies that are coming through, and just point to who can deliver on what they say they're going to deliver on. So I think that's a tremendous opportunity. If there's a way I can help you with that, I'd be happy to do that. But I do think you guys are well suited for that.
And one of our listeners reminds me, I'm not sure who this is coming from, but thank you for the reminder about the focus that we at MedTech had been placing on kind of solving the workforce development challenge, the workforce challenge that certainly prior to the pandemic was probably the single most pressing issue that all of our members were facing, is how can we best recruit and retain the talented workforce that's going to allow our industry to grow. Is NYSTAR, is ESD engaged in the workforce place? Where do you see workforce issues going as we look at the second half of 2020 into 2021?
Fully ESD aware of the workforce challenges, and does take there's the governor's workforce initiative that ESD played a role in. So we've always played a role in it. Generally, we work with DOL on those efforts, Department of Labor. NISTAR individually, though, what we typically do is, like, our cats have a workforce development expectations. There's some benefits for them to spend some money towards workforce development, like I think it's $100,000 of their money if they put towards workforce development. There's no match requirement. I'm going to have to look that up to make sure that's actually a fact, and that I'm not making it up. But so those are some of the efforts that we take on encouraging and helping support workforce development. Our MEPs, quite a lot of them have programs focused on workforce development. So depending on what region that question came from, I could connect them with an MEP or one of our other centers. One thing I would be very interested in doing, if you have some companies that are in a similar area that want to come together and try to figure out what is the common denominator of skills that they need. Can we help convene that meeting, bring in some of the universities and figure out, is there a way that the universities can get students to that minimum level that 3, 5, or 10 companies from the region are interested in seeing, and then they'll take the training over from there. That's something I'm always willing to give it a try to see if that's a role we can play and help support you guys.
Terrific. Well, Matt, before we sign off, I do want to just do a couple of things. First, remind our viewers that next week's conversation will be with Dr. Bob Corona, who is the CEO of University Hospital at Upstate Medical University, who will be talking about how do we ensure the survival and the thriving of hospitals in this time. And so I want to encourage you to participate. But I'm wondering also, Matt, before I let you go, if you could just kind of remind us again, how should folks who are listening connect with NISTAR, connect with ESD, figure out what's out there, and start utilizing your services?
Sure. Happy for people to reach out directly to me. I could give you my contact information now, or you can email it out, however you prefer to do it. Probably better to email it out.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
And then Lena and her team are always, we talk regularly. My team and her team.
Lena Gurek at Fuse
Yep.
Hub. Yep.
Correct. Yep. So Fuse Hub's another entry into the entire system. So either way you want to do it, that's fine.
Wonderful. Hey, Matt, we got a bunch of other questions, but we're running out of time. What we will do is see if we can forward on to you some of the other comments. Want to remind people, if you have questions that occur to you afterwards, to reach out to us. We can connect you directly to Matt and to some of the other resources at Empire State Development. But Matt, on behalf of MedTech and all the folks here, thank you very much for taking the time. This was a terrific discussion, and we look forward to talking again.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Win.
Hey,
appreciate
thanks,
it.
Matt. Thanks,
Take
all.
care.
We'll see you next week.